Right, I think we're just about ready to kick off. So without further ado, um, good morning and welcome to this Ultima webinar. My name is John Burkett. I'm one of the senior technical consultants here at Ultima, working in the productivity team, and my area of special or focus is very much unified comms and Microsoft Teams and kind of Skype before that. In today's session, we're going to go through a general overview of Microsoft Teams and dive into some of the new features that have come out in the last few months, some that are coming soon, and some that are currently in public preview. Before we get into the main part of it, a couple of bits of housekeeping. If you do have any questions, please do submit them via the questions function. I'm flying solo today, so what I'm planning to do is I'll answer all the questions after the session, because I think this is going to run to about an hour. You will be sent a link to the recording, which will come out after the session, and you'll also be sent a copy of the slide deck, which I'm going to walk through in PDF format. From an agenda point of view, we're going to do this kind of little introduction. I'm going to talk about the 4 pillars of Teams, which is how I kind of break down the features and functionality. I'm going to go through some of the new administrative and reporting features. We'll touch on a couple of new devices that have been released, a little bit of new functionality that go along with those devices, and also a new management service from Poly called Lens. And then finally, just a little bit of information about how Ultima can help you on your journey, wherever you are, kind of with using Teams currently. And again, before we actually dive into the technical side, just a couple of reminders and important dates. One which I've mentioned on, I think, every other webinar so far. Skype for Business Online end of life date is July 2021, which is about 6 months away. If you are using that service, please do start planning your migration sooner rather than later. And just a note that this doesn't affect Skype Consumer or Skype for Business on premises if you're using that version of Skype. Microsoft are no longer supporting Internet Explorer for the Teams web app. If a user does use Internet Explorer, they will get a message redirecting or asking them to download the desktop client instead. So it's just something to be aware of from a user training and communication point of view. On the management side of things, the Skype for Business Online connected PowerShell module is being retired mid-February. So just a reminder, if you are doing any automation using the that particular PowerShell module, it will need the scripts will need to be updated to use the Microsoft Teams PowerShell module instead. Basically, they've rolled all the functionality from the online connector into the Microsoft Teams module instead. And finally, I just got a reminder about this myself this morning as well. As of the 8th of February, Microsoft are changing the default behavior for guest access. I'll cover off what guest access is in the collaboration functionality slide, because that's kind of where it sits. But just be aware, if you haven't made a positive choice about whether or how you want that configured, Microsoft are going to default that to on from the 8th of February. So just as a little bit of housekeeping there, and kind of some reminders about important dates coming up and changes coming along. So right, now we can actually start talking about Microsoft Teams itself. So there's a couple of marketing-y type graphics here, and one about kind of the placement of Microsoft Teams in the context of how you would use it in a business. So Teams was released back in March 2017, so not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. And it started very much as a Slack-like collaboration platform. So that idea of being able to have workspaces where you can have threaded conversations and share files and that kind of thing. Since that kind of starting point, it's very rapidly evolved in terms of features and functionality to become what I would consider a true unified communication platform. So a platform that you can use for doing your collaboration, your chat, running your online meetings from, and also doing a lot of your voice and real-time media type functionality. So using it as a telephony system, for example. On the kind of marketing side of things, a huge uptick in Teams usage. Last year, it went from about just under 20 million daily active in July up to just under 120 million, mostly driven by the pandemic and businesses needing to rapidly be able to provide those kind of collaboration and remote collaboration services to workers. From a Gartner point of view, it's always good to see Microsoft and Microsoft Teams specifically up in that leader quadrant. And I guess the two key takeaways from those graphics are, if you are looking at using Teams, if you are in the process of migrating Teams, if you've already migrated to Teams, you're not alone. You're on the same journey as a lot of other people are on at the moment. And the final graphic is just around kind of placement of Microsoft Teams. Obviously, there are a lot of tools, both within the M365 suite and more generally available. So it can sometimes be a bit of a challenge to classify exactly where Teams fits. And for me, this graphic kind of works quite nicely. Basically, Teams is for those people who you are working with and collaborating with frequently. So whether that is your team, kind of your immediate team you're working with, or whether it is a temporary team which is spun up to specifically deal with a particular challenge or for a particular project, that's kind of where Teams sits for me, and providing that collaborative workspace and all the tools you need to collaborate effectively. So that's just to try and put Teams into context as to how you would potentially be using it when you kind of contrast it with things like Outlook and Yammer. Also quickly just wanted to go through where we can actually deploy Microsoft Teams. And from that, I mean kind of what devices can we deploy it on? And the answer now is pretty much anything. From a desktop client, we've had Windows, obviously, and Mac. They added a Linux client last year. So now from a desktop point of view, you've got very good coverage. Teams also has a very good web app. The slide is a little out of date now, it's still got IE listed, but Edge, Chrome, Safari, Firefox all have a Teams web app which works very well. There are a couple of limitations depending on which browser you're using. They tend to be around how many video streams you can have up and how desktop sharing works and who can request control and that kind of thing. They've also got mobile apps for Android and iOS. Both are published in the relevant app store, so you have access to those. And it also means you can very easily package them up and deliver them via an MDM platform of your choice out to both corporate devices and bring your own devices. And finally, support for VDI. Again, they now have a good story around that and support, as the slide says, Citrix, VMware Horizon, and the Microsoft Virtual Desktop. Again, there are a couple of limitations when you're running Teams inside of VDI. It does support real-time media, so voice and video, but in meetings you're limited to the number of video streams you can see and things like that. Each of the three vendors there does have a list of kind of known issues and limitations, so you can kind of quickly dive in and see what the limitations would be depending on the environment. Also, it's worth noting from a VDI point of view, Microsoft have now delivered or made available a specific MSI to use in VDI environments. The key thing that does is, rather than installing to the default location that Teams normally uses, which is local app data, it actually puts it into program files instead, which from a VDI point of view, especially non-persistent is important, because otherwise you'd be reinstalling it every time a VDI session was spun up. So they're working to address, or have addressed, that problem. And you can actually then use that MSI installer on non-VDI environments with a few tweaks. So we've got a few more options around client delivery now as well. So onto the actual features and functionality of Microsoft Teams. There's a huge amount in Teams as a product, so to make it a bit easier, I tend to break it down into 4 areas, or pillars as I call them. Meetings, which is your online meeting type service and your audio conferencing, and also your live events, which is the broadcast platform that Microsoft has. Second one is kind of calling, which is your voice and PBX type functionality. Collaboration, which is specifically focused around teams and channels, and using them to collaborate and work together to solve problems and bring together documents and bid documents and those kind of things. And then chat. Chat's probably the least exciting of the 4 pillars. This is your traditional instant messaging, whether that is Skype that you've used in the past, or something like Jabra, or those kind of instant messaging type platforms, and that functionality is based into Teams. And then kind of the one not on the diagram, which wraps around all of this, is the security, administration and reporting. Because Teams is very much built on M365 and Azure, it means we get access to a lot of the security and compliance and reporting which comes along with those platforms. So it means that Teams, from security and administration reporting, you get a parity of functionality that you do across other Microsoft services, such as Exchange Online and SharePoint Online and those kind of things. So we'll dive straight into meetings. And again, a lot of functionality has been added in the meeting space over the past 12 months or so, and now from a feature and functionality point of view, it's on par with anything else in the market. It will give you, there's kind of, I'll just pick out a few, but the gallery views and the enhanced gallery, or the large gallery view, going up to 49 was a big addition which came out middle way through last year. And again, a lot of people were asking for that, so Microsoft was responsive and delivered it. You can also have dial-in and dial-out audio conferencing. So by default, Teams will want to use the Teams client, but if you do have users who are on the road or in a scenario where they can't be in front of a screen, you do have that ability to dial in to meetings, and also have the meetings dial out to people. And Microsoft provide a large number of conference numbers by default. They cover most countries now, so users can choose a local number to dial into the conference on. Microsoft do also support attaching free phone numbers to the audio conferencing. So if you wanted to, for example, advertise an 0800 number, you can configure that. And you can also actually have custom conference numbers as well, or audio conference numbers. So for example, if in the past you have had an audio conference bridge number which is very popular and you own, you can port that across to Microsoft and attach that to the audio conferencing service. So from a end user point of view, they can still make use of that well-known conferencing number. As I said, scheduling, there's an Outlook plugin which automatically gets deployed as part of the Teams client. You can do either ad hoc or scheduled meetings out of the Teams client as well. And basically what that looks like is, in the calendar app, you have the Meet Now button, which will start an ad hoc meeting or do a new meeting and kind of schedule it in the traditional way and invite attendees and set agendas and that kind of thing. During the preview screen, that's an improved experience, so we can have a look at that on the next slide. Live events kind of sit alongside traditional online meetings. So for me, traditional online meetings are where they're relatively small audience and they're quite interactive, whether that is via video, voice, or kind of the chat. Live events are very much focused around more broadcast type events. So a good example would be town hall meetings, where there is one kind of main speaker who's speaking and a lot of attendees who are listening, but would they be able to submit questions via a Q&A panel. And again, there's especially now that there's a lot more people working from home, live events are being used to deliver round company updates and that kind of type of scenario. Spotlight Focus, or Spotlight Dash Focus, they rebranded it, and Together Mode, they're basically different ways of presenting the video. So if you are typically, I guess for Spotlight, the best use case is a classroom where you would have a teacher presenting and they want to be kind of pinned as the main video screen. So you would right click and spotlight them, and then that would stop students either maximizing their video streams or kind of trying to do something to disrupt the lesson that way. And Together Mode is just taking multiple video streams, and rather than presenting them in little squares, it presents them in a virtual auditorium, virtual lecture hall type setup. And Microsoft are actually bringing in some additional Together templates, I think they're going to call them. So rather than a lecture theatre, you can have kind of more traditional type of meeting room placements. And I've got some other, so as I said, that's kind of what the calendar app looks like. Once you're actually in the meeting, again, it's quite a easy to understand experience. You kind of get all your participants listed down one side where you can manage them, whether that is muting them, kicking them out, letting them in from the lobby and those kind of things. What you will notice here, this screenshot is a couple of months old. You can actually see the person who's called in with their full number. Microsoft are changing that, and they're going to mask it out apart from the last, I think, 3 or 4 digits, just from a privacy point of view. So that's kind of what the meeting experience looks like. As I said, it's very similar to other online services. These are some of the things you can do to participants or to attendees of the meeting. Again, for larger meetings, being able to lock everyone into mute mode is a nice to have and helps your meetings run smoother. And also downloading the attendance list. This is something that, again, education was asking for a lot. So Microsoft have put it into Teams. There are some limitations around it at the moment, and I know they are working to improve it, especially so you can extract that attendee list post-meeting rather than having to remember to do it during the meeting. And then from a kind of what you can do, you've got kind of easy access to a lot of the controls there, so live captioning and recording. And also, if you need to invite someone in ad hoc, you can do that by either inviting them or going to meeting details and sending those across. So that's kind of the stuff that's been in Teams for a while now, but it's good to just kind of touch on it again. Final kind of things that have been in Teams meetings for a while, cloud video interop. So this is very much to address organizations which already have a lot of video conferencing equipment in meeting rooms and aren't, or either don't want to or aren't in a position to replace that equipment with Teams compatible equipment. And what Microsoft have done is they've worked with a couple of partners, so Poly, Pexip and BlueJeans, to provide bridging services basically. So your legacy video equipment would connect to, for example, Poly's Real Connect service, and then that Poly Real Connect meeting gets bridged across into the Teams meeting. So you've got, in effect, a Real Connect meeting and a Teams meeting which emerge together to provide that interoperability. So that's some of the stuff that's been in Teams for a while. I just wanted to pull out some of the things which have been added in the last 2 to 3 months or so. So basically since I gave the last one of these sessions. From an end user point of view, there is a new joiner experience now. So it allows you to more easily preview your video and kind of set your blurring and choose what audio device you want to use. So you've got kind of screenshot of it there. And then there's a couple of quality of life improvements, which are the 5-minute warning. I don't know about you, but a lot of my meetings tend to run long. This gives you a visual indication that you're coming up towards the end and you need to start wrapping things up. Another quality of life is the ability of the presenter stroke organizer to actually end the meeting. So rather than just leave, and at which point attendees can stay in the meeting for as long as they want, the end meeting button allows the organizer stroke presenter to be very firm. This meeting is now over, end the meeting, and eject everyone from it. Live events. At the beginning of last year, so beginning of 2020, Microsoft upped some of the limits around live events. Given the ongoing pandemic, they've left those or announced that they're going to extend those up to June this year. So this is basically, by default, you could have 10,000 attendees in a meeting. They've doubled that. Similarly, events used to be limited to 4 hours. That's again now been increased. So again, just to help with those, I think it's aimed at people who are using Teams to run virtual conferences and that kind of thing, to give them a bit more flexibility to kind of use the service. So again, a bit niche, but they're there if you need them. New PowerPoint presentation mode. So thinking back to Skype, attendees used to be able to, of their own volition, kind of navigate around the PowerPoint deck through the couple of controls on screen there. Microsoft have now allowed or added that functionality to Teams with the great addition of the little I button. So if you don't want your meeting attendees jumping around of their own volition, if you click the little I button, that will lock everyone to the slide that you are displaying. So again, from a presentation point of view, nice addition. Jumping back to the top of the slides, there's a very, very rich ecosystem from an app point of view and integration point of view that Microsoft have opened up, and a lot of organizations and companies have started using those. Microsoft have now extended that integration and kind of open APIs into the meeting space as well. And I'll go through a couple of the options that are available in a later slide. And similarly with, in fact, I'll just jump to that now. So something that people, again, in the education space specifically, but also in business, were asking for was virtual breakout rooms. So this is the ability to have a Teams online meeting and then have, as the name suggests, breakout rooms within it. So this started rolling out in December. I think it was completed rollout by 1st of January. So what you'll now see is this little extra button on your, if you are a presenter, that is, in your Teams meeting, and from there you can create a number of breakout rooms and either automatically or manually assign people to them. So in the example here, I just created 3 rooms, I think. So team red, blue, and green, and then was manually assigning people to them. And those breakout rooms are entirely self-contained. So once you're in them, you can only hear and see what people within your breakout room are sharing, and it has its own chat feed as well. So again, typical use for this is in the virtual classroom scenario, where you want to, or where the teacher wants to kind of break the students into smaller groups to work on particular tasks for a set amount of time. Again, if you're doing business type presentations and you have either a technical or a kind of marketing work stream to go along with those meetings, you can use breakout rooms to have more targeted and topic specific sessions. And then as you need to, you can bring everyone back into the main meeting to provide follow-up and closure and those kind of things. There's kind of tying in with that, as the presenter, you can make an announcement, and what that will do is it will broadcast to all of your breakout rooms saying, come back into the main session, or 10 minutes left, for example. So yeah, interesting feature. Lots of potential uses for it, depending on exactly how you're using and running your meetings. From the management front, it's not exposed in the GUI yet, but there is a meeting policy setting to disable this if you want to. So if you look up the set CS Teams meeting policy commandlet, you'll find the parameter in there. So if you do need to switch it off, you can do. So that's virtual breakout rooms. As I said, it was a feature that education were asking for a lot, and it's good to see kind of Microsoft again being responsive and providing features and functionality that people want. The other big point I wanted to touch on from a meeting point of view was meeting apps. So as I said, from a channels and a bot point of view, we've been able to do some quite clever stuff from an integration point of view and exposing third-party apps and data and interfaces. They've now extended that to the meeting experience. So that's kind of a screenshot of the meeting or the apps which had meeting integration as of beginning of this week. There are going to be more people and organizations coming on board. So you've got the link to the Teams marketplace down there, so you can have a look and see if there are any apps which you're currently using within your organization which might benefit from better Teams integration. And I've just pulled out a couple there. Forms, I've got, and the next slide I'm going to go through and explain what that looks like in a bit more detail. And then there's a couple around, well, the interviews one's an interesting one. It allows you to use an online meeting as your interview space, but put a little bit of structure around it. So questions and scorecarding and that kind of thing. And then X Matters is a task tracking. So if you're already using that in-house, you can now get better integration with that into your Teams meetings. And again, there's a huge suite of APIs that go along with this. And as people get more comfortable and organizations get more comfortable with what they can do, I think this is going to be an area of applications which booms a lot quite this year. So, so kind of that's a bit abstract as what you can meeting apps do. Next slide is a kind of worked example. So this is Forms, which is the Microsoft platform for building and collecting survey information. And what they've done is they have, using the Teams APIs and integration points, they've actually exposed forms via Teams meetings and using them to drive in-meeting polls. So the key caveat to this is you need to attach the Forms app to your meeting before the meeting starts and create at least one poll to kind of open up and make this functionality available in the meeting. And then yeah, it's pretty simple and straightforward, but it gives you functionality that was missing from Teams up until now. You basically create your poll, give it a question, give it up to 6 responses, and there's a couple of little bits of configuration you can do kind of around multiple answers and whether the results are presented in real time or not. And then you save the poll, and then when you come back into when you start up your meeting, you'll notice there is now a little extra button up on the top on the toolbar there next to the Teams breakout rooms. If you click on that, you'll see a list of all the polls that have been pre-configured, and also give you the ability to create ad hoc polls if you need to. And then it's as simple as pressing the launch button, and the poll will be presented out to everyone in the meeting. It's worth noting, if you are on a desktop client versus a mobile or web client, the experience is a little bit different. So on the desktop client, you get a front and center screen pop or form pop, whereas if you are on the mobile or web apps at the moment, and they are going to fix this, it only gets shown up in the chat channel that's associated to the meeting. So it's just, again, from a user point of view, something to be aware of. And then again, you've got a couple of examples of what the actual form and then the results look like. And you can close these polls once you're done with them. And you can, via the meeting space in Teams, you can actually go in and extract the results as well. So if you do need to have a record of how people voted, you can go back and collect that after the fact. So they're the kind of two, well, quite a lot of extra functionality in the meeting space in the last 3 months or so, and then kind of deep dived a little bit more into what you can do with forms, and also how the breakout room functionality worked. So I then wanted to move on to calling. So again, this is an area that probably the beginning of last year, so January 2021, there was a lot of focus and delivery of functionality on it. So at this point, Teams will do most of what a traditional PBX will do, from a making and receiving calls to PSTN numbers, being able to manage those calls. So whether that is putting them on hold while you try and find the right person to answer them, or being able to do blind and supervised transfers. Transfers also has safe transfer functionality now, and safe transfer is, as the name suggests, if something goes wrong when you try and transfer the call off somewhere else, it will actually bring it back to you. So the call doesn't just get lost. If it can't connect to the person you're transferring to, it will get pulled back and connected to you. Voicemail, it does. It will allow users to, or callers to, record a message and have it delivered both to the user's inbox, which is where it's actually stored, but also be surfaced via the Teams client, both as an activity notification and also on the voicemails tab within the calling app. And yeah, there's lots of user manageable stuff in here as well. So specifically how the call is handled when it does come in. So this kind of moves into the space of when a call comes in, do you want it to simultaneously ring your mobile? If you do, it's a couple of drop down options in the settings, and you've got that configuration. So there's no more having to enter shortcodes on a PBX handset or speak to the IT department to set up those kind of call answering and call management rules. It's all exposed to the end user for them to configure. And when it comes to what you can do with calls, there's quite a varied options. You can do the simple things of just send a call straight to voicemail, or forward it out to your mobile phone, for example. And then you can move into more complicated scenarios where, well, it will ring me for 10 seconds, but if I don't answer or if I'm not available, it can forward, or it can notify my colleagues using the call pickup, group pickup functionality, to actually give my colleagues the option to answer the call and things along those lines. So it's pretty flexible, and it can do most of the scenarios that are commonly used. It also supports delegation for those boss PA type scenarios. So for example, a head of a company or head of a department might not be answering their own calls. They might have a PA who's kind of answering all the calls for them, and you can implement that functionality in Teams as well. Another nice addition that came actually towards the end of last year again was enhanced reverse number lookup. So by this I mean, when a call comes in, rather than just seeing the number, Teams will make an effort to match a contact to that number and give you a name to go with the call as well. Up until, as I said, kind of end of last year, it was very limited. It would only look at your Teams contacts. Microsoft have now extended that to include telephone numbers stored in Azure AD. Also, Outlook contacts are included. And if the call is coming in over a SIP trunk, because it's Teams, it will also look at the SIP messaging and try and work out who the call is from based on that. So again, quality of life enhancements to provide some information as to who those calls are coming from and if you want to answer them or not. Um, you've also got call queues and auto attendance, which are Teams' way of distributing calls to a group number. So typical example of this will be if you have a main number, it would come into an auto attendant, and it's the auto attendant which plays a greeting message and then potentially presents the caller with a list of options. So press 1 for sales, 2 for reception, 3 for support, that kind of thing. And auto attendants also have hours of business associated with them. So if Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, you have a reception desk, you can send calls there, but out of hours you actually send it to a 24/7 team, or for example play a message and get callers to leave a voicemail. That functionality is kind of built into the auto attendants. They did some work on those. One of the big features they added was the ability to directly from the auto attendant both transfer to voicemail and also transfer to a off PBX number. So by that I mean you can basically set up the auto attendant so it will send the call out to a mobile number, for example. And again, it's useful if you have to leave the office or you don't have anyone manning the phones. So it's, as I said, it's enhancements and improvements. Obviously, the really big announcement or release last year was the contact center integration and call recording. Both of those were big stoppers for projects that I'd previously been working on. And from that point of view, we can now tick the majority of the compliancy call recording type requirements. And also, again, where customers have contact center, we can provide via third parties ways to address those requirements. So, and again, from the call recording, there's a couple of partners which are certified and about another 10 going through the certification process. So over the course of Q1 2021, I'm expecting there to be a lot more options in the call recording space. Contact center is a bit better served at the moment. There's about, I think, 8 or 10 people on the approved, or companies on the approved list. So you've got quite a big choice in that area at the moment. Microsoft are also working to enhance and improve the APIs, and that is going to give, from a contact center space specifically, more options around how we integrate and what the experience looks like from an end agent point of view. So some exciting stuff coming in that space. The rest of the, this year. From a what's new, this hasn't rolled out yet, but Microsoft are developing a new calling app. So they're basically moving some pieces around, making it a bit easier for people to find things and use things. One of the big things for me is they're going to expose the call forwarding options directly from the call app. So you're not going to have to go up to your portrait, go into settings, go into calls. You can just, as a single click, set that up from the calling app. So that's going to be an enhancement for end users. And again, this is a work in progress screenshot from Microsoft. It hasn't been finalized. I think they're planning to, or the messaging center says that it's planning to start rolling out mid-January. So that should have been a couple of days ago. I've not seen it in my tenant yet, but it'll arrive when it arrives. We can go from there. The other big one for me is Teams SBAs are now in public preview, so you can get hold of these and have a play. 4 vendors are currently providing these or are certified to provide these. Audio Codes and Ribbon are the 2 which I'm kind of looking at the moment. And I guess just to give some background, SBAs or survivable branch appliances was something that Microsoft developed for Skype for Business, and it was to address the specific requirement, as the name suggests, of providing some resiliency and redundancy at the local office or branch level. So in the context of Teams, this is if you have if you're using direct routing and you have a session border controller locally at an office, but that office loses internet connection, which would normally cause all your Teams clients to disconnect and stop working. If you have an SBA deployed to site, all your Teams clients will actually they'll disconnect from the in quotes main Teams service and then reconnect to the SBA appliance on site. And what that'll give you is basic in and outbound dialing. It doesn't give you any of the fancy and clever stuff around call forwarding or the auto attendant elements of it, but it does allow you to maintain that base level of in and outbound dialing capability. So as I said, it's about providing on-site resiliency from a telephony point of view. And again, that's in public preview at the moment, so you can have a play around with it. Especially in the UK, obviously most people are working from home, or a large portion of people are working from home at the moment. So the SBA is probably less being talked about, but going back a year or so, a lot of the discussions I was having around using Teams as a telephony platform was great, but how do we provide a level of resiliency and redundancy for offices if their internet goes down? And the survivable branch appliance is the answer to that. So as I said, it's in public preview at the moment. I believe they're planning to have it ready for release end of Q1, but that's going to be subject to the testing all being signed off and going ahead. And yeah, as I said, it's a for customers who have that requirement, it's a very useful bit of kit to have. And I think once it goes or becomes publicly available, I'll do a specific deep dive session on that and go through how it works, how you set them up, what the media flows look like. Because yeah, SBAs are a large topic in themselves. But from my point of view, it's a really good addition to kind of the Teams portfolio to address those specific type of requirements. So that was calling. Next, I'm going to go through collaboration. So this is probably the newest bit in the Microsoft portfolio. It's the collaboration spaces. So it's your teams and it's your channels. So a team can have multiple channels associated to it. And the team, in most cases, is where you control the membership, so who has access to the teams. And basically, a team comes with a general channel by default, which is always there, and then you can create additional channels within it. So you can gather specific people together on a specific topic. Channels themselves are, in the simplest terms, a threaded conversation, which you can, as you can kind of see on the screen there, you can start new conversations, you can reply to conversations, you can attach documents into channels as well. So if you have a document that is needs to be approved by a group of people, you can put it up into the Teams, into a specific channel, and people can work on it there. Teams can, or channels can also interact with bots. So you can have bots which, for example, sit there and you can give instructions to them and request information from them. So yeah, they're, again, with teams and channels, it's kind of, there's lots and lots of different ways to use them, and it's a case of working out what works best for your organization. So to put it in some context, Ultima uses them a lot around projects. So when a new project is started, a new team is created, and we then use that team to bring all the resources together for a particular project, for a particular time space. But then similarly, my team, so the productivity team, has a team and a channel which we use to kind of ask questions, but also provide technology updates to the team and things like that. So I've also, from an IT point of view, seen them used as a way to track notifications. So, for example, having email alerts come into a channel, and then everyone in the channel can then look at the alert, and you can have a threaded conversation to track and keep an eye on how that issue or incident is moved to resolution. So again, there's lots of different ways to use channels. Right at the top of the session, I spoke a little about guest access. Well, I said that guest access is being switched on by default. Guest access comes into play in the context of teams and channels, and it's basically the functionality that allows you to invite someone from outside your organization to participate and collaborate with you in a particular team. So what you would do is basically on the membership tab, you would put in their email address and send an invite to them, and then that user will be able to log in and see the contents of each of the channels and the team that they've been granted access to. So it's a way, guest access is a way to collaborate with people outside of your organization without having to create them a user AD account and give them licensing and things like that. So again, we use it in the context of some of our customers where we will have a team and the customer is a guest in that team, so they can come in and view and collaborate on projects that we're working with for them. Kind of dovetailing into that is the concept of private channels. So when Teams came out, you had the team and that had a membership list, and every channel had the same membership list as the team, which is what Microsoft wanted, and that's how they designed it. There was a big pushback saying that's great, but there are situations and scenarios where we need to have a team which has got a membership of 100 people, but then an area within that team which only 20 people can access. So Microsoft eventually came up with the idea of private channels, and the best way to describe a private channel is it works like a normal channel, but it has its own membership list associated to it. So you can get a bit more granular about who can see and who can access a private channel within a team, which is good. It provides flexibility as to kind of what you can do with teams, especially when you've got a large number of people in them. Kind of tying in with the idea of guest access and private channels is templates. So it works nicely for us actually, because we have a certain way that when a new project starts, we like the team to be set up. So a specific set of channels which are created and that kind of thing. So what we've got is we have a Teams project template, and when we want when we spin up a new project, we go in and we use that template. So the team then comes pre-populated with all the various channels that we want for it. And again, if you want to take that to the next level, you can actually automate creating a team based on a template. So you can, using Graph API calls, you could have a fully automated process where you click a button in SharePoint, for example, and it will create all the SharePoint elements you need, all the Microsoft Teams elements you need, and copy across documents and that kind of thing. So using the Graph APIs, there's some quite clever automation you can do from the point of view of creating a new team. Similarly, if you are using a ticketing management platform, for example, ServiceNow, where you can do automation, you could have it configured and set up so a service request comes in for a new team, and that triggers an automatic process once it's been approved that goes away and actually creates the team without the need for an agent intervening and doing manual steps. So again, in the collaboration space, it's very much a case of discussing within your organization how they're currently working and looking at ways you can layer teams on top of that to provide value. From a new features point of view, just a couple to highlight really. So a team has always had, and a channel has always had, a dedicated mailbox and a dedicated calendar to go with it. Until now, it was very difficult to actually see that channel calendar. So Microsoft have added an additional app, which is the channel calendar app, which you can directly attach and expose in a channel, just to make it easier for users to see what events are happening in relation to that channel. And then when you schedule a meeting in a channel, it will show up in that calendar. It's worth noting, when you schedule a meeting in a channel, it doesn't automatically invite everyone in that channel to the meeting. They'll just be able to see the meeting in the calendar and then make a decision whether they want to join it or not. So again, it's before rolling it out, you need to be happy that you know how that behaves and what it'll do. Otherwise, you're going to have users complaining about not getting meeting notifications and that kind of thing. The other, for me at least, useful thing that has come along recently is the approvals app. So I spend a lot of my time writing documentation, which then needs to go to management for approval before release. This approvals app is a quick and tidy way of doing that. So it's available in the App Store, and you can pin it to a channel or have it as a standalone app on the left-hand Teams rail. And basically, it allows you to create approval workflows. So you create a what's the wording? New approval request, target it to specific people, and attach the document that needs approving, and then click send. And then those users will get notified via Teams that they have a document that they need to approve, and they can click through and open up a card which has the document attached to it, so they can very quickly open it up, review it, add any comments, and then either approve or reject it. So for me at least, this is far better than the old way of doing things, which was sending around emails saying, can you approve these documents, and that kind of thing. And again, that's all built in now as a kind of packaged app. To go along with that, and this isn't available yet, but electronic signatures for documents as well is, as the slide said, coming soon. So this is where you need slightly more or more formal approval and sign off on a document. You can, or you will be able to capture an electronic signature as part of the approval flow. And I've seen a couple of screenshot previews of that, but as I said, it isn't available even in preview yet. So I would look out for that in the next probably month and a half or so, I think is the timeline we're looking at. So yeah, just a couple of quick extra bits that are in there. From a chat, I'm aware that I'm running a little bit low on time, so I'm going to go through this quite quickly. Chat, it's the chat that we all kind of are used to by now. The ability to search for people, see their status based on their calendaring and what they're currently doing, and then send them a message, and the ability to kind of seamlessly escalate from an instant message to a voice call, to a video call, to a desktop share, to invite in an extra person as necessary. So they did do some work on the presence engine last year to make it more real time. Still not perfect, but it is a lot more responsive than it was. Chat also supports what in Teams or in Skype land would be called federation. So this is the ability to talk directly to another organization via Teams and also Skype Consumer. So again, if you work closely with outside organizations, you can collaborate with them and communicate with them directly via Teams. From a new feature and functionality point of view, again, these are kind of quality of life things. Microsoft have built noise suppression in. It is under the settings devices, and basically will do its best to take out background noise. And again, it's in there. Not a lot of people have kind of come across it, I guess, yet. But it's a nice little feature, especially if you're working in a noisy environment or with a lot of background noise. It can be helpful. We talked about transcription and live captioning in the context of meetings. That's been around for a while. That's now been extended out to one-to-one calls, so you can get that live captioning going on. Another little quality of life thing, you can now see people's mobile and phone number as defined in Azure AD, just off that little drop-down list there. Again, little quality of life things that are kind of making it into the product. The buttons are also now square as opposed to circular, design choice from Microsoft. History menu, not in the product yet. Up until now, in the top left-hand side of the client, you do have little back and forward arrows. That's going to be extended, as the screenshot says, to kind of, or shows, to give you a list of places you've been. So rather than having to kind of step back each time, you can jump around a little bit more easily. So again, little quality of life things, but it's all going to make the Teams experience better for end users. So that's kind of the end of the 4 pillars. The next couple of slides are around administrative or admin and reporting type activities. Custom key encryption is coming to Microsoft Teams. It's in preview at the moment. Custom key encryption is basically where you provide Microsoft with a set of encryption keys, and they use those keys to encrypt your data when it is at rest. Data in Office 365 at rest is encrypted, but it's normally done using the Microsoft encryption keys. This allows you, again, a little bit more control over what encryption keys are used and allows you to limit the access Microsoft has to the data. They've offered this in other 365 services for a while now, but it's good to see that it's being extended out into Teams. As I said, it is in preview at the moment, so you can have a play with it. If you do have a business requirement around using custom keys for encrypting your data, you can now do it. You can, again, this is specifically to Teams, you can stop people using their devices to, in effect, log into, or your corporate devices to log into other people's Teams environments. So again, it's around providing control and security from that point of view. Teams display devices, or Teams displays, which is a new class of device which Microsoft announced at Ignite, are now showing up in the devices section, or devices section in the Teams admin console as separate devices, which is good to have, so you can kind of get that differentiation. Some minor tweaks to the usage report for Teams. So again, that's coming out and will be available, I think, well, yeah, February, beginning of February. And finally, this is one which is going to be very useful. For the security score, Microsoft are bringing Teams into the fold. So they are going to start having security recommendations around Teams configuration. So you'll be able to boost your security score by making some configuration changes to the Microsoft Teams configuration. And that's mainly going to be around things like allowing guest access, having anonymous join switched on in meetings, those kind of things. So some all good improvements. Again, just making the platform better, more easy to use. And again, you get notifications about all of these when they become live via the M365 Messaging Center. Finally, I wanted to just quickly talk about some new bits in the devices space. So a couple of new actual devices have been released. The Yealink WH series, which are Android devices running the Teams app, with the big differentiator being they are DEC based for the headsets rather than Bluetooth. The advantage of DEC being better density and also longer range. There's a new common area type phone from Audio Codes. Again, it's running Android, running the Microsoft Teams app. So again, more choice, and if you're in the audio codes ecosystem for devices, it's good to have. Some new features for the Teams Room app. Again, this is more around bringing it to parity with the full desktop version. So adding in the spotlight feature that we talked about in meetings, adding the voice assistant Cortana, if that's something you want to use. And again, from the Teams phone app and mobile app side of things, just some enhancements to kind of bring it into line with what you would expect from the desktop app. So again, nothing huge, but again, it's nice to have that parity across all the apps. Finally, if you upgrade your Teams conference phones to the latest app, you will get proximity join on them, assuming you have Bluetooth switched on. You've had this on Teams Room systems for a while, but yeah, you can do it on the conference phones now, which again, it's nice, brings them up to parity with what you would expect from the Room system, so you're getting consistency of experience. So yeah, they're the kind of latest devices that have come in the team space. And the final slide is PolyLens. So this is one I've started playing with and exploring. It's basically a cloud service from Poly that you can use for managing your Poly devices. So as I said, it's released and it's working, but it's kind of first version 1.0, I would say. But it's good. If you have a large number of Poly devices, and they're on the approved list, which is only on the screen at the moment, and you are, for example, using Resource Manager at the moment, you can look at using PolyLens as a alternative to that. So you basically register your devices and you can manage them from there. They are planning to add headsets as well. I've not seen the date as to when that is due. So yeah, as I said, I've registered a couple of devices in PolyLens. From my point of view, it gives you a single place to go to and manage all your devices and push all your firmware updates from. So it's going to enhance that management of devices experience. One thing to just touch on quickly is you can obviously manage devices in the Teams Admin Center. So why do you need Poly? Basically, PolyLens gives you access to a lot of the underlying configuration. So if, for example, you want to go in and configure QoS markings on your phone, you can't do that through the Teams Admin Center. You would have to either go into the individual web interface on each device or use PolyLens and kind of configure it that way. I'm realizing that I've run out of time, so just very quickly, thank you for your time. Hopefully it was helpful and kind of gave you some ideas about what you can do with Teams and also what new features and functionality is available. If you do have any questions, queries, or whatnot that you remember after the session, please reach out to your account manager, and we can either set up a session or get your questions answered via email. And then the traditional, this is all the great things Ultima can do to help you on your M365 journey. So yeah, as I said, thank you very much for your time. Hope you found the session helpful. And yeah,